I ultimately gave my entitled step-siblings the Christmas they deserved. And it all started with a phone call that happened a full year and a half before my plan finally came to life. Earlier that year, my dad had made a sensible suggestion. Our family Christmas party was getting bigger every year, and he proposed that to ease the financial strain, we should skip a generation with gifts. At the time, this was a lifesaver for me. I was a 28-year-old heavyweight mixed martial artist and strength coach, which is a fancy way of saying I was a small-time athlete working a day job just to barely make rent while also training full-time. My wife, Sarah, who was my girlfriend back then, was working on her second master's degree. We were broke. I suggested we could just draw names from a hat, but my dad was insistent. He wanted to spoil all his grandchildren. I told him that was fair enough, and that I'd chip in for my grandmother Oma's cruise and buy gifts for my step-siblings. But he shouldn't expect anything grand from me. That Christmas party set the stage for everything that was to come. Let me introduce the key players. First, my stepsister, Brenda, around 40, whose entire personality seemed to have been built on assets that were now, let's say, succumbing to gravity. Then there were her kids, my niece, Kylie, who at 12 was the most vapid teenager stereotype you could imagine, multiplied by 1,000. And my nephew, Kevin, a 9-year-old who was living proof that you're never too young to be an absolute jerk. My stepbrother, Derek, was 36. He used to be a cool guy, but he seemed to have given up on life when his kids were born. His daughter, Chloe, was a sweet and shy 6-year-old who was terrified of my presence, making her the wisest of the bunch. His son, Liam, was a generally nice 7-year-old who was slowly being corrupted by being told to emulate his cousin, Kevin. At the party, Chloe had brought her Nintendo DS, and all the kids were huddled around, struggling to share it. In a moment of foolish generosity, I offered to loan them my own DS to lighten the load. Chloe agreed to share with Kylie, and Liam agreed to share with Kevin. Having deprived myself of my only means of escaping social obligations, I headed to the living room to find that much older cure for dealing with people, alcohol. I hadn't even had time to pour a drink when my trained ear picked up the unmistakable sound of one person pummeling another coming from the kids' room. I calmly suggested to Derek that he might want to check on his kids. But Derek hadn't seemed to care about much for the past 7 years, so he just waved me off. I went to investigate myself. I walked into a scene of chaos. Kevin, while not a good kid, was apparently a talented multitasker. He was managing to strike, shove Liam into a wall, and kick him, all while trying to play my DS with his other hand. He had decided his turn started the second I left the room. Meanwhile, Kylie had simply snatched the other DS from Chloe, who was now sitting in the corner, crying. I shouted for Brenda, telling her that if she didn't get in here to break things up before I counted to 10, I would be having a very stern conversation with her children myself. She finally turned up and separated them. I took my DS back. But instead of teaching her son about sharing or not hitting people, Brenda proceeded to berate Liam, the kid who had just been beaten up, for not simply giving the DS to her little angel and making him look bad. Kylie just let out a dramatic tweenage sigh and tossed the other DS at the crying Chloe. I'd had enough. I excused myself from the party, thanking whatever gods might exist that I didn't have to buy gifts for any of those little monsters. 6 months later, My firm belief in atheism was confirmed when Derek called me. "Hey Ethan," he said. "While I really appreciated the gifts last year, you should really get something for the kids this year instead. Christmas is all about the children after all." "No," I replied flatly. "I show up to chat with you, Dad, and Oma. I really don't give two shits about the kids." "That's a mean thing to say about my kids. Don't you care about them? You cared so much." I shot back. "That at the last party. You couldn't be bothered to break up a fight where your own son was being beaten bloody." I reminded him. "You didn't put pictures on social media for a week because of the bruises on his face." "Kevin is a good kid," Derek mumbled. "Brenda said he just had a bad day." "He was literally beating your child," I said. "If Kevin were an adult and had that kind of bad day, I'd have had a stern conversation with him and peacefully convinced him to lie on the floor until the police arrived." Derek changed his tack. "Well, Brenda and I were talking, and we think you should buy stuff for the kids next year instead of us." "I'm happy not to buy you anything," I said. "But I'm not getting crap for Brenda's little terrors. Especially not when she encourages their behavior." Derek made a critical error at that moment. Completely unaware that his entitled demand would set in motion a Christmas catastrophe of my own design. "Well," he said pompously, "if you aren't going to get something for all the kids, you shouldn't get anything at all. It's not right if you don't treat them equally." "Done," I said. And hung up. A few months later, about 2 weeks before Christmas, an email from my dad landed in my inbox. It was full of links to various toys. I called him immediately. "Hey. What's up? I got your email. What's that all about?" "Those are gifts for the kids for Christmas," he said. "That's cool if you're getting them that," I replied. "I'll see them when the kids open them." "No," he said, his voice hardening. "That's for you to get them. I don't buy for that generation. Remember?" I reminded him. "And I already sent you my contribution for Oma's cruise." This revealed my dad's greatest weakness when it came to his grandkids, a deep-seated desire to spoil them that my step-siblings had learned to exploit for their own gain. "You need to get stuff for the kids," he pressed. "Don't you want them to look up to you as an uncle?" "Not really," I said honestly. "Also, what part of my life suggests to you that they ought to look up to me as any sort of role model?" "Not the point," he snapped. "Christmas is about the children. If you don't get them this stuff, I won't put your name on the card for Oma." That was a low blow. "That's a shitty thing to do," I said, "considering I already paid into that. Will you get the stuff or not?" I looked at the list again. It would cost me more than a month's rent. "Well, I guess my name isn't going on the card then," I said. "You can take this list and grease it up real nice." He cut me off. "Calm your jets. This is what they want." I sighed. A plan already forming. "Fine. I'll get them a token something. But I'm not taking out a loan for this." "Fine," he said. "Just make it something they enjoy." He heard my promise to make the kids smile. But he failed to understand the nature of that smile. It was a classic case of hearing what you want to hear. A mistake he, and the rest of them, would soon come to regret. "Oh, I will," I said. If what I get doesn't put a giant smile on each and every one of their faces, I'll buy you dinner at a steakhouse of your choosing. That's the spirit, he said, satisfied. Christmas rolled around. My wife Sarah and I arrived with not just one, but 4 beautifully wrapped gifts for each of the little ones. My dad eyed the packages, correctly assuming the contents were all probably from the dollar store. But the wrapping was immaculate. And he gave me a look of approval as I placed them under the tree. Sarah and I mingled for a bit. And then I made a suggestion. Since we brought a few gifts for each of the kids, I announced, why don't they open one each before dinner so they have something to do while they wait? Their parents, of course, loved the idea. It gave them more time to ignore their children and talk about them instead. Brenda was looking especially smug as she sent us to hand out the first round of gifts. As they began to tear into the wrapping paper, I got my camera ready while Sarah casually went to get our coats. I stuck around just long enough to immortalize the huge, genuine, shit-eating grins that spread across each of their faces as they saw their gifts. It was perfect. Less than a minute later, as Sarah and I were walking down the hallway toward the elevator, we clearly heard the first deafening blast from the airhorn, Kevin's gift. I have no idea how much of the bulk pack of silly string, Chloe's gift, ended up on the newly painted walls. But I do know they had to repaint the entire place the next month. Liam received a 36-pack of rainbow-colored, off-brand sharpies. And whether or not the giant pile of slap-on bracelets we got for Kylie ended up snapped onto the wrists and ankles of the parents as they tried to contain the chaos is a detail I'll have to leave to the imagination. In all the confusion, nobody even noticed us leave. Many people online validated my choices, with one commenter, a mom herself, noting, as a mom, I can confirm that this was the perfect revenge and kinda genius tbh. She even said she was inspired to go buy harmonicas for her own brother's kids. But my work wasn't quite done. I'm certain that at some point, they noticed the pretty gold envelope I had left on the tree, addressed simply to the parents. Inside was a beautiful card, completely blank except for a short, handwritten note. This was a warning shot from off the top of my head. I've got a whole year to get creative for next time. Merry Christmas. I never had to buy my dad that steak dinner. As one commenter pointed out, the most important thing was that my hard-earned money went where it counted. And I made sure it did. Oma loved her cruise. I enjoyed several more peaceful Christmases with my Oma and Dad until they passed. And after that, I stopped seeing that side of the family entirely. No mention of my gifts, or gifts for the kids, was ever made again. Ultimately, this whole saga teaches a simple lesson: if you try to bully and manipulate people into doing what you want, don't be surprised when they comply. But do it on their own terms. You might just get exactly what you fucking deserve. So, let me ask you, what's the most creative, malicious compliance gift you've ever given or wanted to give to someone who truly deserved it?